Ernest Holmes, page 46. Life is for us today. There will be no change for tomorrow unless we do the changing today. Today we are setting in motion the power of tomorrow. Today is God's day. We must extract from it what life we are to live. Tomorrow is the divine course of events. Tomorrow, in the divine course of events, they will take care of themselves. The soul that learns to live in great gladness of today will never weary of life, but will find that he is living in an eternal here and now. Please speak the affirmation with the conviction that is true now. Life is a joyous venture because I put God first as my unfailing source in all areas of my life. I give thanks that I am healthy, wealthy, happy, and living in deep, loving connection with all.
So this month we have been just taking a look at some of the deep learnings that are present in some of the bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. And so today I want to focus on a book that is about present moment awareness and the power of it. So I want to start with a story about its author, Richard Moss. Richard Moss was a physician at one point in time. This was some 40 years ago. He was a physician, a medical doctor, working in emergency. And he was also an avid mountain climber and wall climber, whatever you call that, rock climber. And so he had his own version of meditation going on for quite some time through the rock climbing and the mountain climbing. So, that's kind of the background. And then this one particular day when somebody was rushed into the hospital who had just been in an automobile accident, and this man was in incredible pain, and he was trying to decide what pain medication to give this patient. And he heard an inner voice that said, "What this man needs is your love." And so he did something unheard of by most medical doctors. Is he put his hand on the man's head and heart, and he felt a huge rush of heat and energy move through him. And the description of it is the man's eyes kind of closed, and he went into some sort of state. He fell asleep, went into some sort of state. And then the room got so hot that the nurses were opening up the windows because the amount of heat that was coming through. And he said a half an hour later, the man who had been in incredible pain and had all kinds of symptoms literally was healed, got up, walked out, and left the hospital. And so Dr. Richard Moss was at a loss as to what had happened because he wasn't really exposed to this kind of thing. And it took him a while for it to integrate, but eventually he left the medical profession and he became a very prominent spiritual teacher. And he's been a spiritual teacher for quite a few years now. And the book that I am going to be sharing is called The Mandala of Being, Discovering the Power of Awareness. So this particular book has within it a beautiful spiritual tool that I have been very struck by. It's really made a huge impression on me, and I know that it's going to be very powerful for you as well, because we hear about living in the now and how important it is to live in the now. Well, this is an actual tool that can help you come back to the now over and over again. So let's do a little bit of background. Being in the now, and I want to acknowledge this, can be very difficult when we are in the midst of a major life challenge. If we're facing health issues, if we are facing financial loss, if we're facing a relationship crisis, anything that involves emotional suffering. Because again, we've learned what happens is that when we are involved in emotional suffering, the cerebral cortex, part of the brain, can tend to shut down, and we can tend to just live out of that midbrain in that emotional turmoil. So this particular book then helps us understand what we do unconsciously that makes our situation worse than it really is, so that we can free ourselves. This actually is a way to show us how to free ourselves from that state and move into the timeless, powerful, universal presence that we are, that each one of us is. So what Richard Moss went through is not just something unique to him. We all have that within us. We have that available to us at any point in time. But it's about learning how to live in that present moment awareness. Because this is what happens, is the more that our thoughts drift to the future, to the past, and to any type of judgments that we might have about what's going on in the present moment, anytime that happens, we are being a source of pollution. It's mental pollution, which it's outpictured in our world as pollution of the planet. I mean, that's the physical manifestation, but it's mental pollution. And I'm doing this for emphasis because I really want to encourage you to see how amazingly powerful and healing this is to use this particular tool of coming into the present moment. So when we drift into the past or the future, we actually drift into illusion. That's the illusion or the Maya that is talked about in all of the spiritual traditions. We live in illusion. It's actually the time-space reality. Time-space is actually an illusion. The only time we have is here and now, ultimately. Here and now, each moment. Our human minds make up the story that there's past and present, but really the point of power, the point of presence, the point of our greatest expression is here and now in this moment. So in the now is the fullness of God as our own lives. We all just sang, "You are the face of God." This is a reminder of coming into the here and now to that truth of who we are. We are all the life of God individualized. There's nothing outside of God. We are the energy, in the present moment is the full energy of life, as I talked about. It's where our wholeness resides. And we talk about we're whole, perfect, and complete. The moment we step in to the present moment, we experience that wholeness. And divine intelligence, that means intuition. The purest form of intuition is present in the present moment. So every time we pivot away from the stories that we're telling ourselves about future, past, or judgments that we're making about ourselves and others, we move into the present moment. We move into our essential self, that recognition of who we are. And that, my friends, is the greatest healing resource we could ever tap into. Ever. Often we tend to look outside ourselves for some sort of healing to come to us. The greatest healing power we can tap into is right in the center of our being when we are in the present moment. And here's something else this is a quote from his book. He said, "The atoms, molecules, and cells of the body actually reorganize themselves to a greater or lesser degree of wholeness according to how present we are." So our entire being responds to present moment awareness. It gets more, all the cells get more reorganized, healthier. There's a greater flow of life and energy. So just to accentuate this, I invite you to say with me and repeat after me, the present is my point of power and healing. The present is my point of power and healing. Right. So major life events then, and we talked about them. Illness, whether it's illness, financial, career, relationship, whatever it might be, when there are major events that take place in our lives, guess what? They are not the greatest cause of our suffering. They are not. We might think they are, but they're not. The greatest cause of suffering is the story that we tell ourselves about that situation. It's all happening in our own minds. It's the stories we tell ourselves about what's going on. It's the stories. So, a great example. Here are a couple of really good examples. An athlete may sustain a very serious injury that curtails his athletic career. But if he tells himself life is no longer worth living, he's going to have great suffering. Great suffering. And you may go through a devastating divorce, loss of a loved one, whatever it may be. But if you tell yourself, I will never love again. Do you see? That's the stories, kind of stories we tell ourselves. There's great suffering. So the suffering is mental. It's in the stories that we tell ourselves. So now the spiritual tool, the mandala of being. This is a way to minimize that suffering. And here's what happens. When we lose connection with the deeper essential self, when we lose connection with the now, we tend to go in one of four places. So I'm actually going to put these on the floor. And Dan has a diagram. So the here and now, this is where the fullness, the power, the presence, the life of God resides. This is when I'm in my center. When I'm in my center, we talk about being centered. That's when we are in the now moment. We've let go of past and future. Up at 12 o'clock is the future. So we're literally making ourselves a visual compass of how this works. Down at 6 o'clock is the past. Over at, I think it's 3 o'clock are the you stories and the me stories. So whenever we get off of the present moment, our true nature, we either step into the past, and when we step into the past, we are stepping into going over, telling ourselves stories about what happened in the past and feeling guilt and regret and blame or nostalgia, sorry that it's not happening now. All of those things, you see how it creates emotional turmoil that keeps us from experiencing the beauty of the present moment. And it's unhealthy. We are literally polluting our bodies, our minds, and really our environment, our relationships, and everything. So we step back in the now. So the other way that we might step out of the now is to the future. And that's where we start making predictions of how we think things are going to turn out. It may be hopeful. I mean, there could be that. But it also could be stories of what we call awfulizing, horrible things that might happen. Catastrophizing. Oh my gosh, this horrible thing might happen. And when we do that, we get into fear and all of its forms, anxiety and worry and doubt and all of those emotions, terror even, that create huge damage to our own being. Okay, so we step back in the now. So here's another thing that happens, is we might think, oh, I'm in the now. But what we really might be doing is we might be living in you stories. These are the stories or judgments that we make about other people. Not only other people, but places, judging other places, judging other things. So it could be the way we judge other people in other countries. It could be the way we judge people in other religions, the way we judge anything. It could also be the way we judge money, what things we think about money, things that we think about our careers, things that we think about our bosses. It could be anything, anything outside of what we consider outside of ourselves. Of course, we know ultimately there's nothing outside of ourselves; it's all one. But those kind of judgments, again, take us off center, take us out of our personal power, take us out of the truth of who we are, and really weaken us and harm us ultimately. Okay, so we step back in the now. The other direction, so these are the four directions, the other direction that can throw us off center are the me stories, the judgments we have about ourselves. And this can go in two directions. It can be superiority. I judge myself as better than other people. Then you have arrogance and you have haughtiness and those kinds of feelings. This is still very harmful to self. Or the other direction we can go is in the negative direction and self-negate or diminish oneself. And when we do that, we start feeling unloved, unwanted, unheard, all of those things. Those are all stories or judgments about self that also weaken and harm us ultimately. So they all of these do that. Does everybody see the patterns we're looking at? So even if we think we're in the present moment, we could still be in you stories and me stories. So it's really about this practice, this mandala of being, which is what this is. And something about mandalas, let me give you a little background. Mandalas are sacred art. There's forms of sacred art that are usually in circle. And when you think about the sand paintings of the Buddhist priests, many of you may have witnessed that before. Anybody witness those being made? I know they did it out at Longwood Gardens a couple years ago. And I've seen it in other places too, different conferences I've been to, but it's so powerful. And the idea of the mandala, and this is not just in the Buddhist tradition, but in many of the Eastern spiritual traditions, the mandala is used as a tool for meditation. And its purpose is exactly what I talked about. It has a center, and the idea is for you to focus on the center and get yourself centered in the now. They also have four directions. Do you see the four directions? So the four directions are what I've just talked about: future, past, you stories, and me stories. And so when we do that, we want to keep stepping back to the center, back to the center, back to the center, back to the center, over and over again. So it's about practicing awareness. When we do this, this is the powerful thing that happens. If we practice this over and over and over again, remember, it's not meant to be done once or just for 1 week, but as a practice, a daily moment by moment practice. As we do this, we begin to strengthen ourselves in this particular spot, in the now. And what happens then is that we find ourselves maybe getting caught up in a story that's taking us down the path of emotional turmoil and devastation, and we wake up in it and go, oh, wait a minute. Am I in the now? No, I'm not in the now. And we can extract ourselves from that story then and come right back to the now moment. That's what happens. It becomes automatic. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but I've been meditating long enough that I can do that. I can now see myself in the midst of a mental, a story that I'm telling myself, and then I I do my best to get back into the present moment, back into a place and a point of personal spiritual power and presence. So when we talk about somebody has presence, you've probably heard that term. This is someone who has learned to live in the now and has learned to be really present. And when you're with somebody who has presence, they are with you when you're talking. Their minds are not going here, going there, but presence. That's our practitioners are taught to have. We practice having presence for each other and being available. That's the healing power of presence. Just being present is a healing power for ourselves and for others. So the mandala of being. And here's another thought that Moss adds about this mandala of being. He said, even thoughts that bring hope or pleasant reminiscences, while very welcome, do not bring as much intuitive wisdom or healing energy as when you rest in presence. That's powerful. Even when we're hoping for a good future, we're not anywhere near as powerful as when we're actually in the present moment. He goes on to say, similarly, holding warm and positive thoughts of another person will not reveal the surprising depth of love or compassion that can suddenly arise when you are really present with someone. So just even thinking loving thoughts about someone, that's good. It's not, we don't want to, but being present and being fully available and present with that person, so powerful. So what I'd like to do then is to take a moment right here and right now to practice. So I'm inviting you to choose anything that might be going on in your life or any story that you find yourself, re-engaging in, whether it's a story of the future, the past, a me story, judgments about self, judgments about others. Whatever it might be, I invite you to bring that to this meditative process. So make sure you identify something. And when you do, I'd like you to close your eyes. And let's take a breath. Breath is a great way to bring ourselves into the present moment. Feeling our feet, feeling our hands, and just feeling our entire bodies in the seat, supported by the seat. And continuing to follow the breath. So imagine yourself in this situation that might be causing you emotional pain or suffering. And notice, what kind of story are you telling yourself? Is it future, past, a you judgment, or a me judgment? And so I'd like you to take a moment and just notice what it is. And I'd like you to practice in your own mind, when you notice yourself in the story, practice just stepping into the now, like I just demonstrated. That you're physically stepping out of that past story, out of that future story, out of the judgment of self or others, and into the center. So just visually practice that. And let's use heart math coherence, a beautiful technique that can be, you can actually look it up on the internet, but heart math coherence, to harness this profound healing and drawing power of love that's right here in the center of our being. So I invite you to place your attention very gently on your heart. And when I'm talking about the heart, I'm talking about the heart energy center, which is right in the center of your chest. So we're putting our attention on the center of the chest. And if it helps you, I invite you to place your fingers on that heart center. Gently place your fingers on the heart center. And let's do some slow, deep breathing. So 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. Just slow it down. Continue counting to yourself several more times. 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. And while you're breathing, continuing the breath, I invite you to feel appreciation, gratitude, and or compassion for the next 3 minutes. So you can just kind of go through your life. You can even just do it in the present moment, thinking about feeling grateful for having a body, feeling grateful for being in the presence of loving spiritual community, for the person sitting next to you, for the temperature of the room, whatever it might be. I invite you to take 3 minutes and think of all the things that you feel grateful for, and also the people that you feel compassion for, including yourself. And while you're in this state, I'd like to teach you a beautiful Buddhist centering prayer. And it goes like this. I breathe in and calm my body. I breathe out and I smile. Dwelling in the present moment. This is a wonderful moment. So I'm just going to repeat that. And you just think it quietly in your own mind. I breathe in and calm my body. I breathe out and I smile, and then smile. Dwelling in the present moment. This is a wonderful moment. Again, I breathe in and calm my body. I breathe out and smile. Dwelling in the present moment. This is a wonderful moment. so fully grounded in the present moment, fully alive, fully awake, fully aware, fully sourced in God. Showing up as that beautiful being that has presence because you are practicing the presence. And knowing that this practice is not something that we just do now. It is something that we carry on with us really for the rest of our lives. Knowing that as we do this, we are truly expressing the life of God that we are in truth. And so it is.